Welcome to another edition of Green is Good. It's a special edition here in San Francisco at the Green Festivals, and we've got a very special guest. It's Harn Soper. He's the general partner of Sustainable Farm Partners. Welcome to Green is Good, Harn.
John, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
This is a great topic. We don't talk about it enough in the media. We don't talk about it enough on Green is Good Radio, but talking about sustainable farming. So glad you're here. It all starts with farming.
It does. As I will point out to people, if you look around the room, absolutely everything here comes from the earth. We're standing on it. And so we need to take care of it. And it is our primary source of sustenance. It's what I would describe as primary wealth.
You know, before we get talking about Sustainable Farm Partners, which we're definitely going to talk about, talk a little bit about the Harn Soper story. How did you evolve from where you were to where you are today?
Well, I grew up in Iowa, and I am what you might call a bi-coastal Iowan. Nobody really thinks of Iowa as having two coasts, but there's the Missouri on the west side and the Mississippi on the east side.
That's right.
So when I was growing up in Sioux City, we have family century farms in a little town called Emmetsburg, Iowa, in northwest Iowa. So when I was 11, my dad took me out to the farms to work with my Uncle Jack for the summer, and I thought it was really cool. I was sitting on a tractor cultivating corn, and my friends were back in Sioux City riding bicycles. Wow. And that hooked me. And so I would spend my summers farming.
Where in your journey, professionally and personally, did you realize that farming is an amazing profession and a great way to live, but farming sustainably is very important to integrate that into the process?
Well, sustainability really sits on a stool with three legs.
Okay.
One is economic, one is social,
right,
the community, and one is environmental.
Right.
And if you lose one of those legs, the stool falls over.
Right.
And so the economics are really critical. And that first summer that I worked for my uncle was a really learning experience. After the harvest that fall, my dad took me aside and said, "Harn, did you realize that last summer making $1 an hour, you made more than your uncle?" And the economics weren't there. It was a struggle. And, you know, my family farms and our farm relationships, these are some of the most optimistic people in the world. To plant a seed in the spring with any expectation that there's going to be a harvest. It's an amazing group of people to work with.
Yeah.
And people you want to promote and help.
You're right.
So the work that we do, we have moved towards a sustainable model in our family farms where we farm organic row crops. So these are large, acreages, hundreds and hundreds of acres. And within our family group, it's about 4,000 acres.
Whoa.
And we farm organic seeds, primarily, grains, that go to organic food producers. So once you get out of the grocery store area where the vegetables are, you're into this 70% of what food production is about. We grow the grains that go into that production.
Okay, now, where in the farming industry was the tipping point? We sort of know back in 05, 06, when Al Gore came out with Inconvenient Truth, the tipping point in the sustainability revolution happened here in the United States in terms of climate change. But in terms of farming change, when did you see, what year was a tipping point where you said, conventional farming, sustainable farming, let's double down and go into sustainable farming?
We tried it about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And we unfortunately planted 40 acres of soybeans right on the edge of town on the main road and thought, okay, and then you don't do anything. You don't spray. Well, it was a mess. And we were the laughing stock of Palo Alto County. So that clipped our wings a bit. Right. In about 2006, I went back to being the family management member of our family, which is 4 generations, over 70 stockholders, which incidentally, every time we make a farming decision is always a unanimous vote. Pretty remarkable group.
That's remarkable.
And is
it, I want to hear that though. Is the family vote via phone, email, or in person?
The family farms, our only reason for having them is to pay for our family reunions. I mean, stockholder meetings. Excuse me about that. And so last August, we had another stockholder meeting. It was in Seattle, where one of my nieces got married, so we all attended it. And of the
Great time to have a meeting.
Good time to have a meeting. Of the 72 stockholders, 70 of us made it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so my father, who's passed, is the first generation. I'm second generation. My two sons are third generation, and they know their fourth generation cousins.
Wow.
So it's a tight family, and the farms serve us in this way and keep us very closely connected.
That is so wonderful. Now, about 20 years ago, you started. It had a little, everybody has a rough start when they start something new, but you started 20 years ago. What percentage of what you grow on those 4,000 acres now is organic and sustainable? Is it 100%, 50%? Give me a somewhat about.
So within our family, which is it's a group of families.
Yeah.
Within that group, there's about 24,000 acres under management. Our families only constitute about 1,000.
Wow.
And so when you add the family groups together, that's where we get to about 4,000. We have 800 acres that will go into production, transition production next year. And so it just continues to grow.
And Sustainable Farm Partners is all that 24,000 with all the families then?
No, actually, we're a funding mechanism to bring in other financial investors. And our whole goal is to buy conventional farm ground, primarily in Iowa, and convert it to organic row crops.
I want to talk about that in a second. Talk a little bit about those supply and demand. Before we talk about organic versus conventional and the benefits herein, share, though, the supply and demand issue. Is there an over-demand for the supply that exists sitting here today in organics?
The demand, back in 2010, when I last checked the statistic, the demand for organic food was 4 times greater than the farmland in organic food production. And at that time, it was a market in the low billions of dollars. Today, that market is growing double digits. It's 38 billion. And so there's still this enormous gap between demand and production. And that'll go on, I would guess, at least the next 10 years.
So really, Sustainable Farm Partners, and that for our listeners and viewers out there, sustainablefarmpartners.com, it's that simple.
Yep.
Is really, you're saying, overall a good investment because the demand is so heavy for this new product, really.
Exactly. So, for example, this year, conventional corn, which typically is GMO corn, maybe some hybrid in there,
right?
Is at an all-time low. It's really dramatically low, and it got as low as $3.25 per bushel of organic or of GMO corn. At the same time, our crops, our organic corn crops, are getting between $11 and $13 a bushel.
Oh my gosh.
So it's an enormous difference. And so we often measure our profitability in terms of net operating income per acre. On the GMO farms, this year it's about $210 an acre. On our organic row crop farms, the average is almost $600 an acre.
Wow.
Is our net operating income.
And they can learn all about the opportunities and the risks and the potential rewards at sustainablefarmpartners.com.
That's indeed, yep.
I want you to share with our viewers, please, Harn, and with our listeners also at home and wherever they are today in the United States and around the world, the difference between sustainable farming and conventional farming.
Conventional farming is focused around genetically modified seed.
Wow.
It's a seed that is patented, and so it's very expensive seed.
Right.
Or as in comparison to organic farming, where GMO seeds are prohibited, and so our seeds are developed under natural hybrid circumstances, cross-pollination. So just by shifting our seeds, we can get our cost per acre down by $60, $70 an acre. We farm organically. The U.S. government, through the USDA, has only one farming program that is highly specific in how to do it, and that's under organics. So we farm on that organic protocol. It's very strict, and that means that when a piece of ground has gone through certification, we can put our organic seal on it, and then that opens up the opportunity for these enormous premiums that we get with our grains. And so we'd use, in conventional GMO farming, herbicides are built into the cell of the plant. You can pour things like glyphosate on the plant. It kills weeds, but it won't kill the plant. And it involves pouring herbicides, pesticides, and they're all synthetic. In organic farming, you don't do any of that. You work with nature. So our crop rotation is part of our weed management program, for example. And so some years we'll grow oats and alfalfa together. Some years we'll grow corn. And the preceding crop helps to put nitrogen into the soil and limit weeds for the following crop, which might be corn, which needs the nitrogen and needs the weed control.
And is this all tracked now, all the algorithms of how to rotate the crops, everything, all via technology now? Is it all scientifically tracked via technology?
No, farming is still very observational because
Really?
every piece of ground, the soil is different.
That's
the
so
markets are
interesting.
different. So you really have to understand where you're farming. So in my world, it not only depends on where you farm, but what you farm and how you farm. You get that equation tight, and it's beneficial to everybody.
Before we have to say goodbye, do you have any other comments for our viewers or listeners to hear about the importance of farming and especially sustainable farming before we have to sign off today?
Well, sustainability is a big deal. We live on a planet that's 70% water, but we can only drink 1% of that water, and we're losing that water, and it doesn't come back. So farming is a big consumer of water, and a lot of water is wasted. It gets washed away. Sustainable farming involves a crop rotation that is much more tolerant of flooding, for example. In the United States, across the Midwest, there's about 4 to 6 tons of topsoil that's lost every year per acre, primarily because of the genetically modified conventional farming model. That equates to about a dime's thickness. Stack up 21 dimes, it makes an inch. So in 21 years, we are losing what took 300 million years to create.
Oh.
So it's not sustainable. Neither are the synthetic inputs that are oil-based, because oil is not a sustainable commodity. But nature is very forgiving if you don't try to sidestep her, but you work with her. And as I said, it's profitable, it's healthy, and you can go on farming that way indefinitely.
Well, we hope you do, and we hope your family does, Harn. For our listeners and viewers out there, to learn more about Harn's great work and his family's great work and Sustainable Farm Partners, go to www.sustainablefarmpartners.com. As Harn said earlier, there's some great opportunities there. You can learn more about the investment opportunities and other things about all the great work they're doing there. Harn Soper, we thank you and your family for sustainable farming. You are truly living proof that green is good.
Green is excellent.
Green is good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.